Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Reno City Planning Commission Thursday, June 8th meeting. And if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Michelle, can I have a roll call, please?
Mark Johnson,
Here.
Ed Hawkins,
Here.
Paul Olivas,
Here.
Charles Reno,
Here.
Troy Schneider is absent, Kevin Weisky,
Here.
Peter Gower.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 3 is public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. I don't have any public comment cards. Michelle, do we have any public comment?
No, I do not.
Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and we will move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes. First set we have is from the April 19th meeting. Commissioners, did you have a chance to review those? If so, any changes? If not, can I get a motion?
Commissioner Weisky, so moved.
Okay.
Commissioner Johnson, I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Abstain, Commissioner Olivas.
Yep, thank you. Next set we have is the May 3rd meeting. Entertain a motion.
Commissioner Weisky, so moved.
Thank you. Have a motion.
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions on that one? Nope, I think we're good. Next set we have is from our workshop on May 8th.
Commissioner Johnson, move to approve.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reno, second.
Okay, thank you. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Commissioner Weisky, abstention.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item number 5, City Council Liaison Reports.
I don't have anything tonight from Councilwoman Barkas.
Okay. Moving on then to item number 6, this starts our public hearings. And the first set we have is unfinished business. The first item is 6.1. This is case number LDC 17-00056, the Bomb Shoppers Square. And if I could start with a presentation from the applicant's representative, if he's here. Saw John earlier.
We can probably move on to staff's presentation if the applicant isn't here.
Let's do that.
Looks like he's coming in.
Good evening, Heather Manzo, Assistant Planner for the record. Before you this evening is a special use permit to establish a drive-through facility at the Shoppers Square Shopping Center. The proposed drive-through facility is or drive-through window really is what it is located on the west side of the existing structure. In addition to the drive-through window, the applicant has requested a demolition of a portion of the western building, about 7,000 square feet in size, and reorientation of landscaping and access and parking in that area. Included in the staff report are Exhibit B materials, which are reference materials that include modified a parking area on the south side of the project, as well as conceptual elevations. Those are not included as a part of the request for the special use permit, but the applicant has requested that those be provided to share with the commission the future vision for the project. Staff is recommending approval with conditions, and along with this, the applicant is proposing there's an existing bus stop along wells around this location. The applicant is going to be adding in some pedestrian access points from the streets to the project on the west side, and will meet the mixed-use standards for design, pedestrian amenities, things of that effect. The NAB had no comments related to this project, and I received 2 calls general questions, no comments related to the project really, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks very much, Heather. Do we have a presentation from the applicant's representative? You could state your name when you get up there. We'd appreciate that.
Douglas Wheely, Foothill Partners from El Dorado Hills, California. And thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. If I may first tell you a little bit about what my company does and what our vision for the property is. I've known the Cazaza family for a very long time. I knew Ralph many years ago. I've come to know Rick pretty well. The family has held this property since it was a ranch. It has grown tired and it's in need of redevelopment, and the Cazaza family reached out to my firm for some help in redeveloping, reimagining, and rebuilding the place. We were delighted to be a part of it. That's our business. In 2003, I gave up greenfield development, and we specialize in infill development around Northern California and Northern Nevada. This is what we like to do. Curiously, the first project I did was to demall an old mall, and that's our intent here. And that is to bring some life back into a project that's been around for a very long time. Used to be ground zero for the Reno community and no longer is. The ground zero has moved away. We intend to move it back. We intend to bring food back to the site. That's where retailing is going. That's where the community demand is. So the first step in reimagining and rebuilding this place is getting the oversized or misplaced merchants out of the way. And since the time that the CVS store was Save-On, the industry has gotten significantly smaller. And if we can move CVS to another location, we have an opportunity to bring a specialty grocer onto the site. So we have come to terms with CVS to relocate them into the former Shepler store. But one of the things that they have asked for is a service window, a drive-up window. And unlike fast food, quick-serve restaurants, this is not a drive-up window with a box that you drive up to and place your order. It's a window, as you know, that you go to if you have a prescription to pick up, and not for other purposes. So I'd like to walk you through the site. Obviously, you know where the property is, but that's this illustration here. A zoning map, which is also an aerial photograph, and the area to the left of the photo is the area in question that we're going to focus on. CVS is currently in the big box in the middle of the plan, right underneath the Cazaza Drive label. And the former Shepler store, Boot Barn store, is the one that's now labeled CVS. And what we are proposing is aligned next to the existing service door. It's not a truck well, it's just a service door, is this service window location. Here's a little bit more of a detail. What we're trying to do is shield and very cleverly double up access for service with this drive-up service window. Trucks come once a week, but we're not a big fan of asphalt. We think, okay, let's see if we can double up uses here, and when the truck is not there, it becomes a bypass around the service window if there's too much traffic there. This design, as we'll see in the landscape plan, also opens up an opportunity for something that doesn't exist today. There's no provision for bioswales, for low-impact development, for stormwater retention or detention on site. But by cleverly reorganizing the site, we create a couple of opportunities for that. We're not here to talk about the larger vision for the project yet, because that's not fully formed. We're talking to prospective grocers. We're talking to our existing tenant Marshalls, which also has more space than it needs and is thinking about what it would like to do. We have some fairly strong interest from grocers in being in the site. What we want to do is reimagine the place. But the first trick, again, is let's get CVS out of the way. We don't want to lose them, but we do want to get them right-sized and open up some space for doing better things with the project. Here again, then, is a better look at what we imagine, or what our intent is for CVS in this service window. The little red car is parked at the window, the blue car is heading outbound, and there you see the opportunities for landscape screening and for bioswales and for stormwater treatment. There too, you see at the north end, we're proposing a significant pedestrian connection to Wells Avenue. This next image might help. This is the property as it exists today. The property labeled -47 is a building that we intend to take out. Wells right now is treated as sort of the back door to the project. There's not much in the way of a public address to the street, and not only is that facade visible from Wells, but it's also visible from Virginia, and it's not very inviting. So we intend to fix that. The existing west entrance to the mall at Tuesday morning is sort of a back door. We intend to turn that into another front door, and all of this reorganization facilitates that. So we spent a lot of time with staff thinking about what this wants to look like. There too is a scheme for the rest of the pedestrian connections in future phases that we will bring to you. We started talking to staff about what this wanted to look like, and in keeping with proposed architecture for the remainder of the Shepler's building, we suggested a shed roof, sloped roof. We also suggested, since it's 1960s period architecture block, that maybe we do something 1960s period architecture, flat roof, sort of Eichler-ish. Neither met much approval from your planning staff. What they asked for was more articulation in that west facade between the west entry to the mall, if you will, right there in the middle of the image, and the existing tower, which we intend to rebuild on the far right of the image. We thought about a single gable, and the gable was very large. We went to a double gable, which breaks the roof line and also creates a shelter over some shade over the window and tends to hide the window in behind the green wall there and in the shadow. Here's a more detailed plan again. That green wall is the back wall of concealed trash enclosure, both for CVS and for other merchants in the center. The trash area sits under the roof, again, trying to get it hidden and out of the way. And in the lower image, to the right, you see a rebuilt facade where there today is a side wall of an existing shop building, now would be storefront, and a patio area to the left of that for new merchants facing Wells and facing South Virginia and facing that facade. And that really is what our proposal is about. We're hopeful for a successful outcome tonight. We want to get going on this project, but as I said, we need to get this first step out of the way, and I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. At this time, I am going to, before we get to the public comment, if there is any, ask commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Reno, we'll start with you.
I visited the site and spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Johnson, as did I.
Commissioner Gower visited the site and communicated with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Hawkins, as did I.
Commissioner Olivas, as did I.
Commissioner Weisky, as did I.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to open up public comment. I don't have any public comment cards. Michelle, do you have any?
Not for this item.
Okay, if there is any, this would be the time. If not, I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to the commission, and we will start with questions. Who'd like to start? Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you, Chair. Question for the applicant's representative.
Yes, sir.
We're all about canopy trees. You've got two very mature trees on that site. I'd like not to see them go away.
Well, I'm also for canopy trees, and I will make every effort to see that that happens. This plan is fluid enough that I think we can make some adjustments and do our best to accommodate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Chair-
Johnson?
Commissioner Johnson, I have a question. I think Janelle probably would be the best to answer this question. Just looking for a little clarity on the condition number 9 that's in here that is, I think it's relatively standard with respect to making sure that all of the improvements meet the requirements of the Public Works Design Manual. My question is that this condition is not going to apply to the entire property? Is it it's limited to the area that we're looking at here? Because there's obviously a lot of circulation issues throughout that entire Shoppers Square area. So I guess I'm just looking for a little clarity. Is this only intended for the scope of this site? And if so, how is that going to be delineated either in this or when it goes in for permit?
Okay, so for the record, Janelle Thomas, acting senior civil engineer. So yes, that site, the portion of the site that we're looking at tonight, that is where the condition will apply. So we will be looking at the circulation in this particular location for the modifications that are being made at this time.
And so the language is clear enough to your, okay,
Yes.
that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Janelle, before you sit down,
Okay.
the, the access point on Casaza Drive, which is on the north side, that's always been a troublesome entrance point. Will moving it over after the building has been removed from the shopping center, will that bring it more into current traffic standards for ingress and egress?
Yes, it will move that away from that intersection. Currently, it's practically on top of that return at that intersection. And so that will bring it closer into compliance.
Okay, will this be a right in, right out only?
No, it is currently designed as a full movement driveway.
Okay, and that won't interfere with the stacking element of the westbound traffic on Casaza making a left turn onto Wells Avenue?
The traffic information that we've been presented thus far have indicated that that is not going to be an issue due to the low volumes of traffic that actually go across that site. But that will be something that we will look at when the final plan comes in.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question, if you don't mind, for the applicants.
Please do.
I have a question regarding your trash area. I like the way you've hidden it. It's great. Has Waste Management reviewed it?
We
and
have had
approved it?
conversations with Waste Management and with CVS, and you bring up a really interesting issue. The trash business is changing. You know, it used to be everything went in a dumpster, and then it is today everything goes in two dumpsters. One is recyclables and one is waste stream. And what we're seeing now is going to three containers. It's garbage and recyclables and compostables. Well, each dumpster is big, and Waste Management is hoping to get away from dumpsters. They're much more efficient in managing tubs, 65-gallon rolling tubs or 90-gallon rolling tubs. And in all of our projects, we are abandoning standard trash enclosures. They take up too much space, they're hard to keep clean, the dumpsters leak, the tubs don't leak, and the dumpsters don't lend themselves to where we're going as a culture, more composting, more recycling. So this is designed not for dumpsters, but for rolling tubs, 65 gallons or 90 gallons, and the
Okay, so
trucks
let's
pull up, grab it, and
thank you
lift
for
it in.
the education, but my point is, you've got some method of accumulating trash in a drive-through for a window to a pharmacy.
Yes. It's
How are you
it's
going to deal with competing trash trucks and civilian cars going through a drive-through?
Great question. The enclosures are enclosed with a roll-up door so that we don't have swinging doors out into the lane of traffic. They roll up. The truck has an eye and an arm that grabs the bin and dumps it right in. So the truck sits on that loading pad and side loads into the garbage truck rather than front loads over the cab. Truck never has to move, and once it's got the garbage, it rolls right back out of there. It never interferes with the drive-up lane because we don't need the 2 lanes of width for the garbage truck. And we've worked that out with Waste Management and other projects.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry for
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
digressing
No,
there.
I didn't ask my question clearly. Thank
I
you.
get excited about garbage.
Commissioners, other questions? Discussion? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to ask the applicant's representative about asbestos abatement as well as maybe when we discuss the hours of demolition as well as construction.
Okay, so you want to start with your question, then we'll get to
Yes,
discussion?
Mr. Chair. Asbestos abatement.
We have not done an asbestos or lead-based paint assessment yet. We've dealt with, you can't be in the infill real estate redevelopment business without dealing with it. We will do an assessment and a determination of the need to haul it off, and we'll haul it off under regulatory requirements, if there's any there.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins, you want to start us off on discussion?
Well, normally we talk about construction hours and all, and that's one thing I would like to get put up straight right now is the construction hours that are going to be involved for doing this demolition as well as construction. And we typically go with 7 in the morning to 6 at night on Monday through Friday, and 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock on Saturdays. No work on Sundays.
So I'm going to ask Claudia for clarification on this because there isn't a condition in here that specifies hours of construction, but I suspect that there's a standard that we're working under here for this project.
We don't have, Claudia Hanson, Planning Manager, we don't have a condition in there right now, but you would be able to put on an hours of construction. And you can just give us the hours and we will put in the standard wording.
Okay. So Commissioner Hawkins, tell me again your
Monday
proposal.
through Friday, 7 in the morning to 6 in the evening. Saturday, 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock. No work on Sunday.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Johnson?
Commissioner Johnson, I guess the question that I have about that, I don't disagree with it, but the actual demolition is not a part of the special use permit. The demolition is, that what we're looking at it on this is for the drive-through. So I can understand it as a construction for that, but the demolition would be handled under a building permit, which wouldn't be attached to this special use permit. And maybe Claudia can confirm that for me, but I just want to make sure that we're not conditioning something that's not actually a part of what's being requested here tonight.
That's correct. You would just be conditioning the construction of the drive-through area, which would actually be probably minimal construction anyway, but the
Okay.
demolition is not part of this.
Okay, so as long as we're that was, I just want to make sure that we aren't actually talking about the demolition hours here. It would just be the construction associated with this drive-through.
Correct. The
Okay.
demolition is not part of the review tonight and would be under a separate permit.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, other discussion? Motion?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Weisky,
Yes, Commissioner Weisky.
in the case of LDC 17-00056, the Baum Shoppers Square, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit subject to conditions and for clarification purposes, even though we have ordinance on construction hours, we don't, okay? We will add condition number 10. I want to make sure I've got the number, yes, condition number 10, which is construction hours of Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., no construction on Sundays, and that is strictly limited to the construction of the new drive-through. No other work associated with any other phases or projects they have going.
Thank you very much. Have a motion?
Mr. Johnson, I will second that, including the added condition.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Good luck with the project.
Thank you very much. I look forward to being back in front of you.
Thank you. So we are going to move on to our next item under public hearings now, 7.1, which is case number LDC 17-00059, Anytime Fitness, 50 West Liberty Street. And if we could have a presentation from the applicant's representative. Welcome. When you get there, if you could state your name for us.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Meading. I'm the Real Estate Director with Basin Street Properties. Basin Street Properties is a real estate owner and developer here in town. Some of you may be familiar with a couple of our recent projects, the former King's Inn Hotel, now 3rd Street Flats Apartments, as well as the Courtyard Marriott Hotel across from the Aces Stadium. We are also the owner and operator of 50 West Liberty. Many of you may know that as the Bank of America building, 2 blocks south of us here. We recently leased a space on the ground floor to an Anytime Fitness club, and I'm here this evening to just present a very brief summary and overview of our request for a special use permit to allow that fitness center to operate between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Claudia, do I go next slide here? Or?
On the
Thank you.
keyboard there. Yep.
As I think most of you know, 50 West Liberty is located on the southwest corner of Virginia and Liberty Street. It's within the downtown Reno Regional Center Plan, and more specifically, the California Avenue District. The Anytime Fitness use is an allowable use in this zoning district. It's the hours of 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. that we're requesting the special use permit for. I'll use this just to point out a few things here. Obviously, the 50 West Liberty building, the space that we've leased to the Anytime Fitness is on the ground floor, right on the corner of Virginia and Liberty there, where it's a little bit of a dated picture. You see the Bank of America logo there on the building. That's now Meadows Bank. The parking garage you can see adjacent to the building. And you can see that the surrounding uses are all commercial. The federal courthouse in the foreground, the U.S. Bank building across the intersection, and the Nevada State Bank building across Liberty Street. The site plan here shows the footprint of the fitness center within the building. You can see it on the northeast corner there. They'll be taking about 6,600 square feet. You can also see the parking garage here, and I'd like to point out all of the building's tenants and guests access the parking garage from Sierra Street there and exit the parking garage onto South Virginia Street, as will the Anytime Fitness members and guests and staff. This is what the signage will look like on the left as you're heading south on Virginia, and on the right as you're heading north on Virginia. The parking garage, we have 447 stalls within the parking garage. It is more than ample for all of the building's tenants and guests, including Anytime Fitness Club members. There will be no street parking required for this. Because we're focused on the hours of 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. with this special use permit, I just want to point out the member usage of the club during that window is pretty minimal. Estimate between 4 and 7 members per hour during that time. As you can imagine, peak usage is between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. And as I mentioned, your primary streets here are Virginia, Liberty, and Sierra. Finally, we don't anticipate any additional noise or light issues being created by this use. It's all internal to the building and contained within the building. So there'll be no impact by that. Finally, I just add, we obviously support this use, Basin Street, as we continue to invest in downtown and encourage the walkability and the livability of downtown. Amenities and uses like this are critical to that. With that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll get back to you on the questions during our hearing. We'll have Jeff come up and give us a quick presentation from staff.
I'll make this extremely quick.
Or not
Thank
quick.
you.
It doesn't have to be quick. Yeah, a presentation.
I see Claudia up there saying, yeah, it does. Jeff Borkott, Associate Planner for the record. The applicant covered everything that I was going to say. The only thing I would highlight is the unique aspect of parking within the California Avenue District, in which the applicant has the option to consider their parking minimums as maximums in this case. So the additional intensification of the property from going from an office to a fitness center has no impact on the parking standards. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Before we get to our public comment portion of this, I'm going to ask for disclosures. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I visited the site.
Commissioner Olivas, I visited the site and I was absent, or no, different, other one. I visited the site on this one. Next one I was.
Commissioner Hawkins, I visited the site.
Commissioner Gower visited the site.
Commissioner Johnson, as did I.
Commissioner Nunez, did I?
All right, thank you very much. I will open the public comment portion of this hearing item. Michelle, do you have any public comment cards?
No, I do not.
Okay, I don't either. Seeing nobody jumping up, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for the applicant. As a member, walk me through parking my car and going to a machine in the athletic area. All the security features included. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So members will park in the parking garage, and you will access the club two ways. If it's during business hours, you can access the club via the lobby of the building. The parking garage has an access to the office building directly from the garage. And then within the lobby of the building, you can access the fitness club there. Or there is another point of access from the garage directly into the fitness club on the Virginia Street side. So after hours, if you're a member, you will have a key fob, and your only point of access after hours will be through that Virginia Street side door with using your key fob. We do have roving security patrol that patrols the property, the building, the garage, after hours as well.
Will any of the bodybuilders, let's call them, fitness buffs, be allowed to take that elevator to the top floor? I'm concerned about security in the use of the elevator.
No, sir. So the elevator, the only way to access the building after hours is if you have to have a separate key fob and be a tenant of the building. And the elevator is actually shut down at 6 p.m. as well. So the only way to access the elevators is with your key fob if you're a tenant in the building.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Commissioners, other questions? Discussion? Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Reno.
In the case of LDC 1700059, Anytime Fitness, 50 West Liberty Street, based upon compliance with applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit, subject to conditions, and I can make the findings.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Hawkins?
Commissioner Hawkins, I can make the findings. I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Good luck with that project. Thank you. We will move on to our next item, which is 7.2, case number LDC 17-00044, the cottages at Comstock. This is a zoning map amendment. And I'll ask for a presentation from the applicant's representative, who's out in the hall again. Hi, John.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Krompottek with KLS Planning, representing the applicant, Rob Fitzgerald, Northern Nevada Homes. Is that better?
That sounds good to me. If I
Okay.
could ask the audience.
Does it sound okay for the audience? Thank you.
Okay, I think we're all sorted. Thank you.
So You know, we had a few things that came up at commission last time, some introduced by the neighbors primarily on the east side of the property, and of course some of the commissioners. I wanted to go through those and show you where we're at today. In this first image, we showed that we reduced the request by 4.5 acres. That was just a rolling it back to the south because that took the property out of the area of the rock outcroppings. That was key issue with staff, and some of the commission expressed the same. So I think it's the right thing to do. It is left for another time. We made the case, and I still think there's a high level of confidence that we can all express here in this process with the Hillside Ordinance that that will be protected with that development code provision. However, this is another layer of protection. So that area is now just under 35 acres. The other issue that we had was the transition zone that we worked with staff on, and here it is in a more refined fashion at 3 acres on the east side that we keep at SF6, and then west of there is the transition to the SF4. So again, the total is roughly just under 35 acres. Another issue that I heard, and I took notes from all of the speakers, I think there were 9 last time, but one was about circulation, and I also heard it from several of the commission. And so here is I think it's important big picture planning thing. We all must know that this is future, but planning is important in this process, the stuff that's not on the table, but thinking ahead. And this owner happens to own all of that land where you see that future road connection extending. The property to the north, it's basically extension of this site, and then that area that winds over to the east in Ferrari McLeod. That alignment does respect the topography, so it's real. It's not just a line on a map, and the dashed part is what we're talking about to make that at some point. The heavy black line adjacent to the east property line, kind of parallel to it, is the actual alignment we had when we did a tentative map that we submitted. So that's a real alignment as well. I just wanted to keep it in the same context. The existing zoning, Lauren Chilson, is Lauren here? I wanted to bring him up and talk. He's done some more analysis. This I think was, I'm showing the existing because we have that 2.97 acres of industrial. And we've done a lot of analysis. We want to keep this real on the traffic comparisons of what we're doing on the increase from SF6 to SF4 on the 31 acres, but then also giving up the 2.97 industrial. And so he and I spoke at length. I remember talking to some of the commissioners, speaking with, or looking at, again, at the minutes from the last hearing. And what we're really saying is that in a lot of different scenario analysis, that this is not an intensification of a project. It is definitely SF4 to SF6, which picks up about 3.5 units per acre on the residential component. But the giving up the industrial and making some reasonable assumptions that we went through show that they're all similar in traffic generation. Lauren, do you want to go into that a little more detail? Excuse me.
Good evening, Lauren Chilson with Traffic Works. I'll just expand on the trip generation comparison a little bit for you, and I'd like to put this up for your benefit. Get that shown. In your packets, there's a trip generation letter that demonstrates the existing zoning as it sits today would allow for up to 314 single-family homes and roughly a trip generation of 2,989 or 90 units. I'm sorry, that's the proposed. Sorry. The existing zoning, let me step back. I read the wrong line there. Would allow for 215 units and then some industrial space. There's approximately 3-acre parcel. We've looked at several alternatives for how that could be built out with different industrial uses or industrial permitted uses. And those are the comparisons at the top of the page there. So scenarios 1, 2, and 3 all compare various uses of 215 homes, which is with the current residential zoning, plus different uses that are allowed in that industrial space. And what you see, there's a variety of mixes that could be obtained or that are realistic, that have trip generation on the order of 3,000 to 3,600 round numbers, trip generation, trips per day. The proposed zoning for this project with the changes in areas that have been presented tonight and those land uses with 314 maximum single-family units would generate about 2,990 daily trips. So what we're showing is the trip generation that's proposed is essentially a wash is what's there. Those existing zonings in place could easily provide more trips, approximately the same number of trips with reasonable land use. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Happy to answer further questions a little later on.
Couple more comments on, thank you, Lauren, on, you know, I mentioned this in the past and I keep driving on it because I think this man's vision for this property has been, as long as I've known him, he's owned it for about 12 years, is to do some kind of density single family or maybe townhome. And he's talked about that for years. And the market is right now. But what weaves into this from what we've seen and we've all participated in is that Reimagine Reno process. And I look at some of the key takeaways on housing. And I really believe that this man is trying to deliver what we are trying to do in our master plan amendment process, particularly variation of housing product and variation of single family lot sizes, which is exactly what we're trying to do here. So I think that's kind of key to the vision and driving a key part of this. So with that, I'll leave it to any questions the commission have. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks very much.
You bet.
We'll get back to you on the questions. All right. Jeff, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Commissioners and Chair Gower. Jeff Borkhardt, Associate Planner for the record. Let me just pull up this image here real quick. As you recall from the last Planning Commission meeting in March, the discussion primarily centered around where staff desired the open space designations to protect the rock outcroppings. As you can see on the north boundary line, and the reason why the staff was concerned is these contour lines right here are the rock outcroppings. So this was the original proposed line right here. The applicant has proposed to shift the line south to right here, eliminating this portion from the proposal. What this has done is decreased the area by 4.53 acres and thereby remove the rock outcroppings from the request. So the open space discussion is no longer relevant to this proposal. The original proposal yielded 343 single-family residences. This revised portion yields 314. So from the original proposal, the traffic has actually decreased. The existing zoning yields 215, as Lauren stated, but with the industrial zoning, the traffic net's neutral. So as part of the tentative map improvements, that's when the traffic improvements amongst the various different streets will be discussed, and that's when an actual proposed project will be proposed. So I'm available for any questions, should you have any. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Before I get to public comment, I'm going to ask for disclosures. Commissioner Reno.
I had visited the site prior and recently spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Johnson, as did I.
Commissioner Gower, I visited the site and communicated with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Hawkins, as did I.
Commissioner Olivas, as did I, and in addition, I was absent from the original presentation, but I've read the minutes and the prior staff reports and the public comments and feel comfortable participating tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Weisky, I visited the site and previously spoke with the applicant's representative.
Okay, thank you. So getting into public comment, I do have public comment cards. Reminder, if you want to make a public comment, please fill out one of these forms so we can get you on the record with your name. So each speaker will have 3 minutes. If you could state your name when you get up to the microphone. You'll hear a beep when you have 30 seconds left. So just be respectful of the time as we have a stack of cards here. So appreciate that. Going to open public comment and begin with the first person, Bill Kennedy, please.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm a resident of Redstone Drive.
And Bill, if you could just speak into the microphone there.
Right here?
Appreciate it.
Good
Yep.
enough?
Thank you.
I'm a resident of Redstone Drive, 235 Redstone Drive. And our concern is the traffic on Comstock, as well as the council knows, we just got out of a drought, and I don't think it's safe to say that it won't happen again. The sewer is overloaded now. They've already been fined. There is a problem with Comstock because of the traffic. If one of the residents that live on Comstock elect to park out in the street, it essentially becomes a one-way street. The railroad track is there. There's difficulty in firefighting if there happens to be a train there. There's a lot of issues. But I know that we're opposed to that 4,000-foot deal they put in there. The 15,000 that they originally offered up years ago, probably 12 years ago, we didn't have a problem with that. But that 4,000-foot deal just opens the door for more density, less services, more problems. And if we have a drought again, less water. We've already been through that. So that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much. The next speaker that I have is Steve Thomas, please.
Good evening. My name is Steve Thomas. I live at 3035 Comstock Drive, and I have lived there for 22 years now. And in that 22 years, I've gradually seen more traffic from the University Ridge area increase, as well as any other new developments. So basically, my standpoint is that Comstock Drive at the moment is just about at capacity. There is not room, and I did a quick calculation today that we're adding about 400% more vehicle travel just because of the density of this project. And it's all, at this point, going to be fed to Comstock Drive with no other egress. I did see a proposed Magic Road to the north that is not really the direction that most of these residents are going to be headed anyways. So I don't really see anything but trouble on this narrow, winding, steep, shady, used to be a shady little, back road to access the neighborhood. And now we're going to, and I'm not kidding, quadruple the traffic on that. It's not going to be pretty seen in the wintertime when this steep little windy road is covered with ice and snow. And I think this project needs a provision to provide secondary access to these 314 new residences that do not negatively impact Comstock Drive access. I also have a question about the industrial use. What's proposed there? Originally, that was going to be a higher or lower density single-family residence, and I guess that's recently been changed to industrial. I have no idea what plan for that is, what type of industrial is going to go there. So with that said, I think that the increase in density of this and all feeding through one narrow, steep, windy street is not a very good idea and not good planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. The next speaker that I have is Daryl Simmons, please.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Daryl Simmons. I live at 250 Boxer Drive, and you have to forgive me because I wasn't at the other meetings. I'm kind of playing catch up on some of these issues at hand. What I have here is the people that can afford to build these buildings of this size can also afford the best attorneys, traffic engineering specialists, and other specialists. Their engineers and specialists will only provide the information useful to get done what that builder wants to get done. They will not inform you of any findings or even any safety concerns that may hinder their progress. The problem with this is we, the working class homeowners, cannot afford to do, nor do we have the time to do what the builders are doing to create a fair debate. For the record, I am a Reno firefighter, so I have some safety concerns here. Number one is the safety concern with the ingress and egress of the proposed building that's going to go into place. I think there should be 2 ins and 2 outs, and I know that it's going to pose a problem for me if I'm driving a fire engine trying to come into a major issue. I know there's 2 entrances and 2 exits, but they're really close. I think there should be another way out, like the other gentleman said, possibly over on Virginia or some magic road north or somewhere else. Safety concern number 2 is the railroad tracks being right there with pedestrians and also specifically children. Safety reason number 3 is the area of Comstock roadway that stays shaded during the wintertime gets extremely icy. It has not been a priority for snow removal. Also, the amount of gravel that collects, actually I have some pictures here, that collects on the sidewalk there becomes a slippery slope. It wasn't until yesterday that I saw a neighbor sweeping the sidewalk. The sewer drain under the overpass is constantly being pumped by vacuum trucks, indicating that there's a problem with sewage. Also, the area between Comstock and the underpass, where the railroad tracks is, has no lighting. I want to show you these pictures here while I'm talking. So, I don't know if that comes up there. You can see all that. That was just day before yesterday. 41 seconds. Doing all right, huh? So there's no lighting there. And as we all know, J.K. Metzger was also hit and killed on a nearby portion of Virginia in 2011. For the people who live on Boxer Drive, it's going to be an extremely difficult feat for us to come out of Boxer Drive, which dead ends into Comstock, and it's a blind curve. So we already have an issue, and now it's going to be compacted. I found no conclusive plan for sewage, and if there is some, does it involve the railroad, and have they already given their permission for an easement? That's all I have. I'd like to see there be another egress and ingress, especially to go out to the side or another direction. Thank you.
All right, Daryl, thank you very much. Next speaker, Christy Harris, please.
Hi, my name's Christy Harris, and I live at 235 Boxer, right down the street from Daryl. And my in-laws built on that street in the 50s, so we've been driving that road for a long time. Everything my neighbors just said is so true. Actually, my husband went off Boxer going 5 miles an hour down into the gully because of all the ice 2 years ago. Luckily, he wasn't hurt. It's a very narrow street, lots of ice, and to be able to get in and out, it would be a nightmare. And we have the university parking too, and all the kids and the alcohol and the drunks walking around, from September through January, February. It's a narrow street with the railroad, and I couldn't imagine trying to get out when everybody's backed up at the railroad trying to get into the 314 homes. I wish this could be thought of, the Magic Road, maybe Parr, Virginia, something not on Comstock. Please, not on Comstock. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker that I have is Bonnie Kennedy.
Hi, my name's Bonnie Kennedy, and I live at 60 Greenstone Drive. And I don't believe $350,000 is affordable housing, first of all. There's currently about 225 houses on Prospect Hill, and that includes the original subdivision and the houses on Achilles, Isis, Zeus, Atlas, and Diogenes. It does not include any of the houses that are on Socrates or feed into Socrates. Comstock is at best a one-lane road. If there's cars parked on it, it's a one-lane road. The traffic on Comstock and Socrates is busy, and I might add, fast. Apparently, people don't realize that the speed limit is only 25 miles an hour. In addition, the 300 proposed units is more than doubling what's up there currently, and the traffic would be disastrous with the additional traffic. If there's any traffic that would cut over to Diogenes and Achilles, that would be disastrous too. The Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting, Mr. Fitzgerald said this is only the first phase and that his proposal is to go up and connect into what's up there at Par. How many more units is that going to be that's going to feed onto this one-lane road? The traffic on Comstock, and he had a perfect example. I've seen cars parked on the sidewalk during a football game. There's no place to go, and that road is so bad that the school district won't even use it for buses anymore. When you guys re-engineered the intersection at McCarran and North Sierra and Comstock in 2015, the left turn lane was eliminated. Or to create the left turn lane, it eliminated the right turn lane, so there's no free right turn. If you're waiting to turn right when school's out, when parents are picking their kids up at the daycare and on an alley, there's no place to go. If you're gonna turn right onto North McCarran, you have to wait for the light. During the football games, the cars are parked clear up to Greenstone, and I don't know how you guys expect to manage this additional traffic. The sewer was one concern that I have. Is there sufficient use? Is there sufficient space in that line? And most everybody up there still is on septic tanks. So if you get all of these 300 additional units plus, it's going to impact that. And a couple of years ago, I'd just like to remind you guys, you denied a special use permit for a guy over off Socrates to develop his land, and I would hope you would do the same this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bonnie. Next speaker I have is Jim Hill. Or Susie Hill, you're on the same card.
Same, Jim Hill.
Jim Hill.
Now, I live on Greenstone Circle, which is right off of Greenstone Drive. We travel Comstock constantly, and you guys really need to go up more than once and look at this, because it is going to be a nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie, did you want to speak?
Hello, I'm Susie Hill, and I had just one question. With the changing in the zoning, I was concerned with the impact that would have on the other areas other than this, the new building how much of the area will that affect and become industrial? There was here a year or two ago, we were having a problem with somebody wanting to put in a rock quarry up there, and the noise and everything they say is really horrendous. Is that going to change the zoning for them and make them industrial now? So my question is, I would like somebody to look into that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the last public comment card I have is from Richard Gephardt.
Hi, my name is Richard Gephardt. I live in 220 Redstone, right across from Bill. And I use this area, most guys around there walk down there every day. And a common problem you hear from previous comments and tonight is the traffic issue. This flaky road we got going to the north, that means nothing because it does not, we're talking about how to get out of the area. This whole area here, Comstock comes up here.
Richard, if you could just bring the microphone with you when you go over there so we can hear you still.
Oh.
Just bring it.
Flip the map, I'll talk loud. This whole, the area they're talking about, this on this website, this shaded area, the thing we're talking about tonight is just simply just half of the area, nothing here. And then they want to have a road that goes up around that way. And the whole area is surrounded by a railroad track. It's, and on the east and west side, excuse me, on the west side, on the north side is by Par, and that railroad goes all the way around there. They're doing a whole bunch of development up by the jails. There is no access. What people are doing right now is they're coming down Virginia and 395, coming over to Par, and also coming down Virginia 2 or 3 days a week. That road is backed up all the way to Bonanza. That's over a mile of traffic. And then the McCarran intersection is all blocked up too. It's very congested. And it's dark, like this in here, you're going to have a bigger problem. You're adding another 500 cars just for this local development here. And there's no access for those guys that they decide to do stuff up north. Where are those cars going to go? Comstock is pretty much a dead-end road. It just serves streets off to the east that are all privately owned. The other thing that again, I would encourage you to make sure we have a complete plan, not just a piecemeal thing. This thing is going to go in, and really the only reason I see that they're changing the zoning is to put in a hotel or a condominium or whatever and a restaurant, which is going to add more traffic if we start doing that. So this number, the cars from 215 houses is underestimated. And again, the other thing that I come from an environmental perspective is this is a major drainage here. When we get a lot of rain, that area floods up almost up to the railroad. It's 5 feet below the railroad, and there's no drainage. When you develop an area, you're going to have more drainage. Where is this water going? I haven't seen any plans in that. And as an environmentalist, my thing is too is that this hillside here, 75% of that is wild onion. And it literally, the first thing that blooms up in the thing, and I don't know if you guys require environmental assessments of this kind of stuff, but that should be a consideration. That's very unique. I walk all over this area, and I've never seen anything so concentrated as what I have there. So I wish you would consider that. Do not consider just a piecemeal thing. See the whole plan, estimates of how much traffic is going to be going there. Where is that going? It is impossible to go down a Comstock. It ain't going to work. And the only other access is to get over on Socrates. There's only 2 access roads to do that. So thank you.
Right. Richard, thank you very much. I do not have any other request to speak cards. If you would like to make a comment, you can do so and fill out a card after your comment. If not, I will close public comment. Oh. Sorry. Were you coming up? Yeah, I'm going to take you on your offer. Okay.
My name is Gwen Schunkweiler, and I also live at 3035 Comstock Drive. I've lived there for the past 12 years. I've also been an administrative faculty member on the campus for 26 years, so I've seen and witnessed the incredible growth in student numbers, which has impacted the amount of traffic on Comstock because so many of these single-family homes are now rental properties on Comstock and up above from where we live up towards Greenstone and Brownstone. And instead of, 3 or 4 people with 2 cars, you've got rental properties now with 5 and 6 cars because you've got 4-bedroom homes with this kind of student population and density, which is fine, and it's expected, I understand, with the growth in the university. However, the other thing that I don't know, no one has mentioned, is the amount of soil that is going to have to be dug out from Prospect Hill, from this area, and replaced to be able to build homes. We just recently remodeled our house on Comstock that was built in the early 70s, and the soil in that area is all the shrinking clay soils, and it requires an incredible amount of soil removal and replacement and compactment. And I'm sure the developers are aware of this, but what that means in terms of large trucks coming in and out of there during the construction phase, bringing in appropriate soil so that stuff can be built there. And that, again, the narrow, single lane, almost Comstock Drive coming from McCarran up to the railroad tracks to the entrance to this area is going to be incredible. And the impact on the neighborhood, the impact on the early Head Start, which I know may be relocating there at Anelli and Comstock. And again, as mentioned before, this whole area has become a overflow parking for UNR football games. And, and the parking on-street parking on Comstock also creates an incredible load that narrows down to basically 1 lane at many, many times, especially during the academic year from August until May. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Gwen, if you could just fill out a comment card so we have that from you.
Yeah.
Anyone else wishing to make a comment?
Yeah, my name is Don Kennedy, and I've lived at 60 Greenstone Drive for 26 years, also administrative faculty at UNR for 32 years. My concern, of course, is that you can't make Comstock any wider under McCarran. You can't do it. You can't make Comstock any wider under McCarran. You can make it a little wider where they want to come out, but you're going to have to fill in Evans Creek. You want to fill in Evans Creek. And by the own admission of the traffic engineer here, you're looking at an extra 3,000 trips a day. For God's sakes, 3,000 trips a day. We can hardly accommodate on Comstock right now the traffic that's on it because of the overflow that we get from Socrates. That's just a fact. I'm not trying to dig the guy in his project. I'm just telling you from a planning commission standpoint, that's just a fact that the overflow from Socrates in and of itself is stifling at certain times of the day. And when you get the trains coming in, the train with no brain, I might add, that sometimes stops there, there's an issue there. The fireman and his fire safety thing, he's dead on. I don't know the guy from Adam, but he's dead on. You can't widen Comstock under McCarran. Well, you could, I guess. Anything's possible with enough money and time. The other widening prospect of it is to fill in Evans Creek. Okay, there's an environmental issue there, whether you're an environmentalist or not. And just the concept of 3,000 trips a day by their own traffic manager has to give you some pause in a planning aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Okay, I will close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission. Who would like to lead us off with questions? Commissioner Weisky.
Mr. Chairman, if I can I ask the applicant's representative to come forward? He had a few minutes left on his time and address some of the questions before we start asking questions. Some of the questions that were raised by the public. And then from that point, I'll start questions.
Good suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right? Mr. Weisky, did you want to hear from our traffic engineer? Me? Pardon me? Yeah, there's a more qualified expert in the room, so let's see, Mr. Kennedy mentioned traffic on Comstock, so I'm going to defer some of this to, in the interest of managing time best, everybody's time.
John,
Yeah.
okay. You've got a traffic engineer. If you
Yeah.
want to turn the traffic questions over to him to respond to them in general,
Yeah.
that's fine. Go ahead. But how about sewer capacity?
No, I was just going to
How
get to
about
that.
second
That's right.
access?
I was going to get to the.
How about the narrowness of the street? What is your access going to be? How about the industrial component?
Right.
All those questions you can answer.
Yeah, of
and then-
course, yeah. Now, I was going to say, the second one that Mr. Kennedy had says sewer's overloaded. We have an easement that Mr. Fitzgerald's paid for from the railroad that becomes the extension of the road, the sewer line that serves capacity to the site with, and again, it's not a zoning issue. We actually have it worked out in a map that we've put on the shelf, as you all know, but that has been addressed. Mr. Thomas talked about the road. What is the proposed use? There's a little bit of confusion, obviously, in the eye. What we did is some scenarios, right? We looked at something that we thought was reasonable in our assumptions of how much traffic could come out of the eye today. And we lowered our building coverage to 0.11, which is below an industry standard, right? People don't just throw away their real estate. It's a flat square piece of land. So we had 0.25, you thinking that was legitimate on the first go. And we lowered it to be very, very cautious and did a couple scenarios like a fitness center, a hotel condominium, and a restaurant, and all of those show more traffic generation, or really for traffic purposes, very similar traffic generation to what's on the table with this proposed project. Again, there's Mr. Simmons who talked about safety concerns with ingress, egress. We have a provision for a long-term connection to the north, like I mentioned. We also met with the state to talk about that Comstock underneath the McCarran Bridge. We have a plan for plenty of roadway capacity with a bike lane, and then have PEDs on at the expense of the applicant. He has to, that slope paving that comes down to the pillars needs to be pulled back, and that would be the the sidewalk section underneath that bridge. We have a very clear plan on how to manage that. Railroad tracks, it's a development issue. Nobody's shying away from it in a zoning hearing. But we have had comment from the railroad, not in the zoning context. We know we got to deal with it. There's going to be some mitigation that goes on at that crossing. Christy Harris mentioned narrow street with railroad. Again, this is the same issue. It's duplicate to the last one. Ms. Kennedy mentioned sewer. Again, I touched on that. We know that we have capacity. It's going to cost him. I saw the agreements. There's a lot of, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars he has to pay to do the agreement for sewer and for water along the railroad easement.
Okay, John, why don't you go ahead and, in the sake of time, go ahead and have your traffic engineer come up
Okay.
and discuss the components of how adding all of these additional units will benefit the neighborhood
Can you
traffic
deal
pattern.
with these, please, Lauren?
If I could ask the audience to be respectful of the speakers up here too, please. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening again, Lauren Chilson, Traffic Works. Let's start with the overall trip generation. That's clearly a concern and understood. The bottom line for this application is the existing zoning that sits on that land right now already allows for and assumes approximately 3,000 daily trips. That's what sits in the existing zoning. That's exactly what we're coming back with. That's the wash. And so while everyone recognizes in the room that's a significant increase, nobody's saying it isn't. That's what's allowed by zoning, and that's what the planning decision is made on, as I understand. So having said that, we have completed a very thorough traffic engineering study. It shows that the ultimate volumes on Comstock will be under 4,000 ADT, which is the city's standard for roadways that have driveways, so we're being respectful of that. The applicant already understands that it, and has offered up to widen that roadway several feet to make it meet City of Reno collector standards. We've proposed to add an uphill bike lane. We've proposed to add downhill sharrow markings to provide bike and ped connection. We have proposed to widen and provide a 4 to 8 foot wide sidewalk the entire length of the street from the undercrossing to the project access, including dealing with the railroad tracks. We know we have to do that. We've analyzed the width there. I believe it can fit, but we have to meet UPR requirements. There's no way, shape, or form around that, and we're not trying to get around it. So I genuinely believe we've tried to meet the requirements, that we meet the requirements of the city, that the traffic can be accommodated. Yes, it's a significant increase, but it's allowed under zoning. It's assumed under zoning.
Thank you very much. With that, Mr. Chairman, may I start with questions?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Jeff, if you would, please. Jeff, for just clarification point, please. We're looking at zoning tonight. Strictly zoning, correct?
That is correct. The development project has been submitted, but is on hold until this gets approved, until the applicant resubmits with a number of comments that staff provided.
Okay, so at this time, we don't know what is being proposed for a build-out, correct?
Correct. The assumptions with the zoning, with the proposed zoning map amendment is a maximum development scenario.
Okay, and that's what we are to look at tonight with a zone change and a density change is what the maximum build-out can be, correct?
Correct.
Okay, the traffic engineer has just stated that if the property is developed as is today with its current zoning, there will be approximately 3,000 daily trips. Have you confirmed that?
I'll defer to Janelle, but one thing I will state is the scenarios that they put up there with regards to sizing potentials were far more realistic than the first submittal that they provided, which was like a 25,000 square foot restaurant or something like that. So the numbers were extremely skewed the first time you saw this. These are far more realistic in terms of their square footage and development potential on the site. So I'll defer to Janelle with regards to whether or not the numbers actually are correct.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, Janelle.
Hello. Again, Janelle Thomas for the record. I did go over those numbers that were presented in the staff report as have been presented this evening, and they do coincide with the IT trip generation manual that we typically use.
Okay, so then you can confirm for us that the average daily trips is about the same between what's being proposed for a zone change versus what's existing, which the owner, the property owner at this time, or whoever comes forward with a development project, if they didn't do the zone change, would be allowed to build it starting tomorrow morning if they could get a permit overnight, correct?
That is correct. They would be able to present a building permit application for the current zoning.
Okay, and at that time, you're the right person for this question also when it comes to relating to sewer and utilities. It's at that time that city staff confirms and verifies capacities, correct? Am I?
That is correct. So the applicant would be required to confirm that there is adequate capacity in our sewer lines and storm drain lines, so on and so forth, any of the utilities that are being provided. We work with our Public Works Department to confirm those values with their model that they have in place.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'll stop questions and let somebody else have it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Janelle, I'm going to ask you a question then. There's, with access and just so you know and so the planning commission knows. We have a set of findings to make. Planning commission knows this. Particularly finding H related to public access. So for me, there are multiple elements of public access, but the two ones that are kind of surfacing for me are capacity, and we've talked a little bit about capacity. That's in the traffic engineer's report. You just talked about that. The other part of it is safety, and we heard some comments about the safety. You can have a roadway that's functioning at capacity that may still present some safety issues. How does the city evaluate safety, particularly related to, I guess what's not necessarily a unique roadway with Comstock, but there are, some certain elements about it with, snow and it's sort of curvy and it goes up the hill. How does the city evaluate that and determine safety when it's looking at a development proposal like this?
So again, Janelle Thomas for the record. We work very closely with our Public Works Department. They have staff that are responsible for clearing roadways, for performing snow removal operations throughout the winter months. And when we do receive complaints from the public, we do work with those maintenance staff groups to provide mitigation strategies or develop any kind of safety measures that may need to be implemented into certain roadways. With this project, as it's being presented today, it is being proposed that the roadway would be improved to meet current safety and traffic standards. And so when the applicant does come in with its application, those measures would be taken at that point. We would evaluate the current condition and then make recommendations regarding the safety aspects that should be incorporated into their project. They are currently proposing to widen the road through Comstock, as Lauren stated previously, with a bike climbing lane for the uphill portion and a sharrow, which is a shared lane for the downhill portion. And then work with the grades underneath the crossing structure at McCarran in order to kind of reconstruct that area to provide for pedestrian access. And that addresses the public access, sidewalks, pedestrians, so on and so forth in finding H.
So then and going back to that finding and the decision that we would have to make based on that and the other findings in there, is it, in your opinion, that with the trips that are included in this table 1 and the traffic summary, using that scenario and the upgrades that are being proposed, that it would maintain not only the access but also the safety component?
I believe that this project has the ability to satisfy that component of it with both the safety of the project and the access.
Chair Gower, can I step in real quick too? I just wanted to clearly convey that the project proposed improvements along Comstock would be associated with whatever tentative map or development proposal that comes in. So it would not be triggered based on just the zoning change. It would only come forward with some sort of development proposal on the site. That would all be taken into consideration at that point.
So Jeff, now that you mention that, and since you stood up there to say that, without a zone change, and if the city were reviewing a development with the existing zoning, would the city require those upgrades on Comstock?
More than likely, yes, because they trigger a similar number of traffic trips. And so the Regional Transportation Commission and our city staff would look at this and say, well, you're generating some trips here, you need to make some improvements. In addition to that, the existing zoning still defaults back to a number of different general standards within our city zoning code, which require street improvement upgrades and things like that. So yes, it would require those same improvements.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question's for traffic, probably Janelle. I'm a pretty smart individual, at least I think so, and I'm looking at scenario 1 at 215 homes versus scenario 3 at 315 homes. Try to make me understand how I'm getting 3,000 trips out of each scenario, and maybe I'll buy everybody dinner. Make me understand, because I really don't understand those figures.
Okay, so are you referring to the first scenario, scenario 1?
215 homes, the way it sits right now.
And that's in addition to the garden center lumberyard option, right? Hold on.
Yeah, that
Lauren's
should
tricking
go
us.
with 2 acres of industrial.
Are you referring to this table or the
I was referring to the traffic
previous
table that
table?
was in the.
In the staff report? Okay.
Right.
It's that one, correct?
I think so.
That one's different. I think it's the April 19th from Traffic Works traffic report that's Exhibit B in the staff report. And Commissioner Hawkins, are you looking for a description or a methodology for how those trips were generated?
I just want to figure their math out with 215 homes giving us 3,000 trips versus 315 homes giving us 3,000 trips. That doesn't equate in my book.
Yeah, so there's an existing industrial zoned portion of the property right now. And so what the applicant has done is said, here's a development scenario on the industrial portion. Now, if you look at the one that was included originally, you could see that they proposed a 32,500 square foot restaurant. That's pretty unrealistic. So in my staff report, what I did the first time around is I assumed an 8,000 square foot restaurant, which had still significant traffic trips. If you want to go back to this one right here. What they've done is assumed a number of different other uses that would be permitted under the industrial zone, which is a garden center, a lumberyard, restaurant with an athletic club. They chose a 5,000 square foot restaurant, 10,000 square foot athletic club. Both of those are realistic generation numbers there. The restaurant, 4,000 square feet. Hotel condominium, I don't know how realistic that is on this particular site, but the first two development scenarios could potentially be realistic at this location. What they're doing is considering development scenarios, what-if scenarios. And they're using the maximum development potential of 215 houses under the existing zoning where it currently exists as residential. If they change the industrial zoning, get rid of it, over to single-family 15, which is 15,000 square foot lot minimums, that number goes down and it changes to residential numbers. The residential unit goes up because where it's existing single-family 6 now, it's changing from 6,000 square foot lots to 4,000 square foot lots. So the number of residential units go up, but the number of commercial square footage goes to 0. That's how you get the balance.
Only if you say so. I don't agree with you on that.
So Commissioner
Well-
Hawkins, are you asking for the assumptions that go into the trips? And if so, it might be a question for the person who developed the report.
Traffic report. I agree
Well,
with that,
and-
yeah.
Okay.
And maybe just to provide a little bit of more clarification is that you do have to understand that there is that other zoning component that's in these scenarios. So you're not looking at just 215 homes versus 314 homes. You're looking at 215 homes on a portion of the lot, and then you're looking at the industrial zoning. So, do you want
Mr.
Lauren
Chair,
to
can I
come
make a
up and try and
suggestion?
explain it?
Can I make a suggestion? Can you put up the existing, the actual map that shows the multiple parcels, whether it's the existing one or the proposed? I think that would help, and use that in the talking discussion over where these are coming from.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if I'm understanding Commissioner Hawkins' question, he's trying to get the assumptions for how these numbers were generated for the particular units. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so maybe we can have Lauren, if you could come up and just explain that for us. Appreciate that.
Happy to. Lauren Chilson, Traffic Works. Commissioner Hawkins, the bottom line here is we have in the existing zoning right at 3 acres, 2.98 acres of industrial land use existing. That can take the shape of many things, everything from restaurant to athletic club to garden center, those ones we put in this table, and a host of other things. That particular acreage has a floor area associated with it, typically something on the order of 20-25%, and you get a square footage out of that, 25% of the acreage, and you can develop that with whatever use you wish that fits within that zoning. Those uses generate tremendously higher per square foot number of trips than a single family home does, right? Consider a restaurant, just for example, at 3,000 feet versus a 3,000 foot home, square foot home, tremendously different. So take those 215 residential units, which are essentially the same thing from a trip rate perspective as the 314 units, just a smaller number. The net difference is everything that's in that commercial site that generates rate at a tremendously higher rate than single-family homes does. And at the end of the day, that's a net wash because that small 3 acres generates a lot of trips in an industrial land use. Does that answer your question? And it's all based on ITE, nationally accepted trip rates. I don't create these trip rates. I pull them out of the manual. That's the nationally accepted standard.
I understand it, but I'm still not going to accept it. You've answered what I believe the question was, but I'll leave it at that. I do have one more question for Mr. Kompotic. We've got on page 9 of the staff report, area description that shows land use, master plan designation. And I'm looking at SF6, SF15, SF9, all on the boundaries of this property, and I'm wondering why we're going with SF6 and SF4 when we're already sitting at SF15 on the boundaries in SF6.
What, you're on page 9?
Page 9, area description.
I got a different. What's that?
It's on page 4 of my version.
Okay, there you go, page 4. I was looking at. You're looking at the master plan or the zoning, did you say?
Yeah, where it shows SF15 and 6.
Yeah.
And you want to take that down to SF4 and SF6?
Single family next to single family. If you look at purpose of our zoning code, for example, if you go one notch higher on the intensity level, if you look at the purpose, I can't quote the purpose or intent of MF14, but I can get close, and it says it's appropriate next to single family. So if MF14 is appropriate next to single family, and here we're doing a transition zone, which is SF6 next to the SF15 and then the SF4. Plus the lay of the land is such that we have the road that separates that SF15 from the actual houses in the SF4. We step down the hill and we step further away from those houses. That's all buffering and design criteria to make it compatible.
So many things we look at.
Yeah.
We buffer, if we've got an SF15 home next to what we're doing, typically we buffer it with an SF15, is that correct? As that buffer, and then we shrink it down to an FS6?
Claudia Henson, Planning Manager. I would say it's a case-by-case basis what the appropriate buffer is in that specific location.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Reno?
Just so we can kill this traffic thing. Lauren, maybe a quick question here. So I see how you're getting the 3,000 and 3,000, the comparison. And I know that we're talking about a zoning map here, not necessarily a development yet. But could you tell me how that 3,000 will impact the intersection of Comstock and Virginia?
Certainly. Lauren Chilson, Traffic Works. As I noted, we did perform a traffic study for the entire project. That was the one that was the proposed, not exactly the action here tonight. It was only different by just a few housing units, though. All the intersections that were studied, discussed with the city, were functioning at level service D or better with the project. That's through the 10-year horizon timeframe, including background growth, with the exception of the Evans Enterprise intersection down by UNR, which is sort of a side issue just a little bit, and I could explain that if you want to. But essentially, the roadway would function within the criteria, volume criteria. It would be with a future project enhanced to meet those traffic volumes, and the level of service at the intersections is accommodated within city policy.
Okay, I understand you spoke with NDOT, right? And you discussed, or maybe John did, I don't know, discussed
the team did.
improvements under that, over, the pass right there. How wide is Comstock? And is it I mean, I guess I'm wondering, at what point do you have to get some permission from NDOT to encroach underneath the bridge?
Sure. The width between the piers is 41 feet. We're proposing a roadway section of that fits within 36. That gives a little room to additional room to work with sidewalks, bike lanes there. At the point we would need to talk with NDOT if we affected the structure, if we pushed back the retaining slopes, those concrete slopes on the sides or anything like that that's structural. We absolutely need to work with them. But there's width in there. There's width in there in front of the piers and even behind those piers to fit in all the improvements that would be needed, we believe.
And that's within the right of way?
Yes.
It's not, you have to get permission from NDOT?
Yeah, that if you look at a right-of-way map, it covers almost that whole major intersection area. It extends through that bridge, and yes, there's right-of-way to make that happen.
Okay, thanks.
Lauren, you mentioned level of service. What's the existing level of service on Comstock and then going into that intersection?
Comstock in Virginia is currently level service C. It's right at the kind of at the fringe between C and D. With the increase in traffic, it goes to D, which is still an acceptable level. So there's a moderate increase there. It's still within policy level service.
And that's the C extends. If you take it, it'd go all the way up Comstock to the ingress-egress point to this area.
Yeah, that's specifically to the intersection.
Just the intersection.
The roadway would still function within level of service C, as the capacity is about 6,500. If you want to look at 7,300 ultimate capacity, we're not proposing to go anywhere near there, right? Let's stay under the 4,000 and be respectful of driveways that exist on that roadway. But yeah, we'd still have acceptable level of service. The 4,000 is sort of a livability goal, if you will. It says, if we're gonna have driveways fronting this road, let's be appropriate here and not crank it to 7,300 daily trips. And so we're maintaining that 4,000 threshold.
Okay, appreciate that. Commissioners, other questions? Discussion, Commissioner Hawkins?
I've got one question for the traffic man. We've got one of the findings is to preserve quality of air and water resources, and I've circled the quality of air, and my annotation is traffic at South Virginia idling. If we have that many trips that we're generating, you can imagine the pollution that's being spewed into our air by sitting there waiting for the light to change at North Virginia and Comstock. There's where I have a real problem.
Sure. So again, if that intersection, and we project it will be, is functioning at level service D, that means 35 seconds or less delay per vehicle on average. That's, again, meeting city policy, meeting RTC policy. So while we don't quantify the emissions from vehicles on all of these projects, not that it couldn't be done, but it's not typically done. At that type of delay, that's a very moderate delay in town overall. It's not expected to be an air quality impact that would exceed any other standard condition here in town. That's the best I can answer it without giving you specific calculations.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I could ask John one question.
Please do.
We haven't touched on it too much, John, but I need to know where the secondary fire access egress is out of this development. Or in your zoning change, there's got to be something there that
We've got a label over the top of it there. Let's see. You can see it a little bit on this map. So, oh man, that's pretty, right here is you see that little black line there? That's actually an easement that comes through the end of the cul-de-sac there and then extends west through the Tumwat parcel there. That's our secondary access, fire access connection.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Commissioners, discussion? Commissioner Reno?
Yeah, I'll say a few words here. On the discussion part, this is a zone change. And so I think the argument's been made pretty good that there's really no net change in the potential for traffic here. I personally think getting rid of the industrial use is a good thing and switching it to a residential use, but maybe I could hear from the other commissioners on their thoughts on removing that industrial zoning. By getting rid of that, we kind of get rid of a big trip generator in the future, I think, that there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of things that could happen on that zoning, whereas if we switch it to residential, we don't have that potential. So any thoughts would be great, but I kind of look at it that way.
Yeah, Commissioner Gower, I'll chime in. And, looking at this in terms of the process that, it's going through and being at the zoning phase, we don't really have any sort of a definitive project on these parcels right now, so we don't know exactly what's going to be there. All we're looking at is, numbers. So, obviously the main questions were in terms of traffic and what the trip generation was going to be onto Comstock and going into that intersection. And for me, the information that was provided related to the traffic and the proposed improvements that would be incorporated as part of a project and worked out definitely made me feel more comfortable with that finding H that I had highlighted that I needed to make. Commissioner Reno, to your point about the zone change with the industrial parcel, I agree. I think that's probably a more appropriate, zoning for that area. And in terms of the trip generation going on to Comstock, I think that would make a difference too. So, I was comfortable with that. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'd also be curious to hear from the other commissioners. Commissioner Weisky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask a question of John Krompottek again, please, for clarification purposes? John?
Please.
The industrial component, you're asking for a zone change from I to SF4, correct?
It's to.
Did I misread that on the cover sheet?
I'll show you on the map. Somebody steal my package? I got it here. So it goes to SF4 on that one parcel. 1.57 acres, and then the other two combined to 2.69. We're leaving that at SF15. And the reason is because of the master plan designation is single family there, where the rest of the site is mixed residential, 3 to 21. So let me show you the master plan took.
Okay, but on that,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I've been running through my mind as I'm looking not only at the overhead, but at my staff report, is it looks like you're still leaving a sliver to the south of the industrial as gray. It's shown as gray on the overhead. So you're leaving a sliver of it as industrial?
No, that is in the railroad right away.
That's the railroad right away.
Yeah,
Okay,
and so we just
okay.
don't have, right, it would be.
Got it.
Okay. A little
Got it.
presumptuous for me to be taking that off the map.
Okay, so how does the SF4 blend with the SF15s around it? I mean, you just got done saying that I believe you said code allows you to go one step greater than what is existing, right?
I didn't say it that way, but it's, I think
Go ahead and repeat it the way you.
what I
want me to
recall,
know
and
it.
you could validate this in pulling up I said MF 14, which is obviously more intense than what we're proposing here, single family next to
But we
single
don't-
family.
Yeah. We don't have MF 14.
I was trying to illustrate
Okay,
the
well,
point.
let's talk about the numbers that are up here.
Okay, so SF4 next to what we have is when we actually designed this, we had a street that goes through the middle of there, and we had a little townhome component on the north side, single family attached, and then the larger lot single family on the 2.69 acres.
Okay. But the existing homes to the north of it are SF 15. They're larger lots, right?
Right.
So, and you're putting larger lots below it. So you're creating this little SF4 island in the middle for density purposes.
We thought it was, I mean, if you look at the plan, I mean, it's single family next to single family. If we had to do some buffering, there's a lot, it's all in the way you approach the design of it, but we thought it was a good use of the land.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
You answered it.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, for comments, I've vacillated with this 2 months ago when we saw it, and until we got numbers that I believe are realistic numbers on traffic counts today, and that's typically what makes a difference when I look at a zoning project, is how it's going to affect the neighborhood with traffic, and we're looking at a balance. If we make a recommendation to City Council for approval or denial, City Council can look at it as how they want, but I'm going to make my vote on approval or denial based upon how a change of the zoning is going to impact the neighborhood, traffic-wise, glare, dust, noise, a lot of different components, accessibility, public pedestrian accessibility. And with the zoning change, I don't know how you even look at it for public access because we don't have a project. To me, there are pieces in here that make sense and pieces in here that don't make sense under H. But for what we can attribute to a zone change, and knowing that our staff has told me tonight in my questions that they went back and they reviewed the numbers as provided tonight and agree with the numbers tonight where they didn't agree with them before, I don't see where this zone change is going to make any bit of difference to that neighborhood, because if it's not approved and the developer decides to build it the way it's zoned, they're still going to have 300 possible trips a day. And if it's like the neighbors pointed out earlier, if those are rentals and they're doubled up in all the bedrooms and the cars are doubled up, that's still the allowed use, and that's what's happening in that neighborhood. When it snows, the road gets icy. Whether you build one house or 300 houses, it still snows. It still gets icy, and it's the same road unless when staff gets this project, not a zone change, but the project, then they can make improvements to the road and enhance the safety for the neighborhood. And I'm sure that with all the conversation staff has heard, that's going to be priority one. So I will now be voting in favor of this recommendation to City Council.
Well said. Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I think Commissioner Reno kind of hit the nail on the head from the very beginning for me, that getting the industrial out of there. I mean, one of the things that we struggle with more than anything else on this commission is when we have uses such as these industrial ones adjacent to residential. So I could see that coming through if this didn't happen as a special use permit for one of the suggested items or not. So getting rid of that is, I think, a benefit. And again, to echo Commissioner Weisky, it's a zoning issue. We don't have a project yet, but we have a lot of concerns. And I share those concerns with how this can happen, but I'm also looking at, I guess, the master plan, which has always had this as, SF6, I mean, zoned that way. That's what the master plan calls for. There's, we've always intended for this area to be developed as housing. This is cleaning it up and per the traffic, kind of keeping it along those same lines. I went through and again, did the list of findings that we have to make. And again, I think there are some here that are appropriate and some that aren't. But the responses that I've heard from staff tonight lead me to believe that we're making the right move by clarifying, simplifying, and getting everything into a single-family zone that we can then review once the project comes forward based on the findings we have here. So with that, I agree. I can make the findings for the zone change. I think there's a lot of questions here that are unanswered when it becomes a project. And I think I want to state that for everybody that's in the audience. The concerns that have been raised tonight cannot be addressed in a zone change. They have to be addressed once the project is brought forward. We've heard those concerns, we share those concerns, and we will be looking very much at those concerns. So my approval and recommendation tonight is in no way stating that everything has been addressed. It's stating that the next step can take place where we can hear those items. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Commissioners, other discussion? I would just add, and I'd like to,
Well, go ahead.
I would just like to add and again echo and thank the commission and staff and the audience tonight for building the record here, because that's essentially what we're doing. And our authority on this as the Planning Commission and a zone change is to build the record for the City Council to make the final determination on the zone change. So appreciate the questions that were asked, the concerns that were raised, and establishing that foundation for the decision-making going forward. So kudos to everyone. Commissioner Reno.
I agree with that statement, absolutely. And Commissioner Weisky brought up a good point about this SF4 island, and I had concerns with that as well. And I think Mr. Comprodic answered it, but I would like it on the record that I would prefer it to be SF15, just because everything around it is SF15, and it would make a little bit more sense to be that, but I don't necessarily have an objection to it, but would prefer otherwise.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm willing to make a motion unless there's further discussion.
Please go ahead.
In the case of LDC 17-00044, the cottages at Comstock zoning map amendment, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to recommend that City Council approve the zoning map amendment by ordinance. I can make the findings that are listed in here, and I would also encourage that the discussion at council take this open-ended discussion into account when they review our recommendations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weisky, I'll second that, and I can make all the findings.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the item? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed.
Motion carries 5-1 with Commissioner Hawkins opposing. I'm going to move down then to our next item on the agenda, which is item number 8. Discussion and possible initiation to amend Reno Municipal Code Title 18 regarding public notice requirements for the master plan adoption. Sienna, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. For the record, Sienna Reed, Senior Planner. As you are well aware, we are on the home stretch of the master plan update work, and we are starting to look forward to the adoption process this fall. In advance of that adoption process, we are seeking initiation of an amendment to Title 18 that would clarify the applicable public notice requirements for master plan adoption consistent with state law. Per the Nevada revised statutes, public notice must be provided by newspaper publication 10 days before both the Planning Commission and City Council public hearings to adopt the master plan Currently, Title 18 specifies noticing requirements for amendments to the master plan, but not for the instance where we have a master plan being repealed and a new one being adopted. So at this point, staff recommends that the commission initiate that amendment to Title 18, clarifying that notice by publication is required for adoption of a new master plan consistent with state law. And should you choose to initiate this amendment tonight, then we would plan to bring back the ordinance to you for consideration at your July 5th meeting. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Sienna? No? Discussion, motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Weisky.
Thank you. In the case of amending RMC Title 18, I move to uphold staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Hawkins?
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks, Sienna. Moving on to item number 9, this is a recommendation to City Council for the appointment to regional planning from following members of our commission listed on the agenda: Commissioner Gower, Hawkins, Johnson, Olivas, and Schneider. Claudia, are you leading this for us?
I am. I'm just reading it to see how making sure that we've noticed it. So on this, we also have a change that I was going to cover in my announcements. John Marshall has been appointed to the Planning Commission, replacing Chuck Reno. And with Chuck Reno leaving the Planning Commission, that will be another opening. So we would be looking for 2 recommendations at this point.
So is that properly agendized?
I'm thinking
then under
about
this
that.
item?
No, because John Marshall's name would need to be on there as well. I'm looking at the attorneys to
Legal
see
counsel.
if
This
their
agenda
agreement. I
was
think
printed
John
before
Marshall
that.
would need to be on there as well. So we can bring that back at the next meeting.
Well, if council wanted to appoint him, if the commission wanted to appoint John Marshall, but the way it's agendized, then the folks that are on there now, you can appoint
Rec-
people.
Recommendation
Yes, you
to
can make a
council.
recommendation of those folks that are on there tonight.
Okay.
So for clarification then, the commissioners that serve on regional planning now are Commissioner Reno, Commissioner Gower, and Commissioner Weisky. So the item is to advance a recommendation for,
Your options under the current agenda item would be to consider Ed Hawkins, Mark Johnson, Paul Olivas, and Troy Schneider. And we have 2 openings. We will have 2 openings. We
Okay.
don't have them right now. In July, we will have 2 openings.
okay. And so for clarification, Commissioner Weisky's term is not, it's not expired. It's still
Correct.
standing. Mine
Correct.
has expired because I filled in for someone else. So that's why I'm up for.
Oh, correct, that's right. It's
That's why
reappointment of
I'm
you.
up for
Yes.
reappointment.
Yes, reappointment for you, and then 1 more.
But that's not included in this because Commissioner Reno is still on regional planning until his term on the commission is done.
Correct, so this would be for July. So you could make your 2 recommendations out of the names on here. John Marshall is not listed on the agenda at this time.
Okay,
So if somebody wanted to consider him, it is, you could not consider him because of the way it's agendized, so we could bring it back at the next meeting.
okay.
Or you could go with the list on the agenda recommending 2 people, up to 2 people.
Up to 2.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Weisky.
I would like to make a motion for recommendation to City Council for reappointment of Chair Gower and appointment of Commissioner Hawkins for regional planning.
Okay,
Commissioner Reno, I'd second that. I guess I'd like to hear from Commissioner Hawkins. Are you willing to accept that? Or you too, Commissioner Gower?
Yeah, and I think it'd be an honor for me to serve with him. Thank you.
thank you, and I feel the same. I'd like to continue serving. Okay, I have a motion to that effect and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks for navigating us through that.
Sure, sorry, it took me a moment to figure that out. Things changed a bit yesterday.
Okay, then Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report. I don't have anything to report on that.
I think there's one meeting here in a couple weeks,
I think you're right.
end of the month.
Staff announcements.
Once again, Claudia Hanson, Planning Manager. I did mention that John Marshall has been appointed to the Planning Commission. He won't begin until the July meetings. And then June 21st, you do have a Planning Commission meeting, and that is dedicated to the Stonegate proposal. I have been working with staff and the applicant and the representatives. Since we have dedicated an entire evening to this item, it is a very large application. You will be getting a very thick packet, very large, it's about the size of the code. So there's a lot of studies, there's the PUD, we're on version 5, I think, of the PUD. Staff and the applicant have been working very hard on that. So we will get it to you as soon as we can. It's a lot of work on both parties. But we have dedicated the entire evening. Since it is so large, I would recommend that we allow the applicant more than the typical 15 minutes, as they will be presenting the entire PUD that evening. So we'll work with the chairman and work out how it's going to be addressed. But notices have been sent out for that item, so you may be hearing public comment starting probably tomorrow.
Claudia, will the packet be posted any sooner on that item, or is it still scheduled to be posted on the Friday before?
We will try to get it out sooner.
No, it's work on your end, too.
It's, we can probably get the handbook up sooner than that. It may be the staff report and attachments that are later, but we'll get it at least on the website. We'll get what we can up as soon as we can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a
Mr.
question
Lacey.
for Claudia, please. I'm assuming because of the amount of information that's going to be provided to us, we're going to, even without a lot of public comment, we're going to be looking at a fairly long meeting. And if we have a lot of public comment and we can't get through it, I'm sure the applicant would like to get our opinions and vote on it right away, but would it be considered appropriate for us to ask for a continuation for a following week if we need more information? I mean, from what I have been privy to from the applicant's side of things in some conversations, we're looking at a lot of detailed information, and we want to have time to go through this, and if we needed to take it to a second meeting, is that appropriate?
It definitely is. This is probably the largest project that this specific planning commission has seen. Not probably, it is the largest one you've seen. We originally were going to schedule it as a workshop. You can't vote on an item on a workshop. You can't approve an item on a workshop. So we scheduled it as a standard meeting just in case you got through the entire thing, giving you that option in that night. We're not really anticipating that you do get through it in one night. So we're setting it up that they're kind of outlining all the issues, whether we're okay with everything, what concerns we might have, if there's more information. We may get more of that before the 21st, but we're going to outline all of that. You may or may not have the same concerns. You might have additional concerns. So we are looking for you to outline those. I mean, if everything's resolved and all your questions are answered that night, fantastic. If
Okay.
not, definitely appropriate on something of this scale to outline the concerns you have. We would ask you be as specific as possible so that we can go back and answer those questions. And then we will schedule another meeting, either another night just for this project or at least with a light load with other items.
Okay, thank you,
Okay, you're
appreciate that.
And then one other item, as you know, staff has been working on the adult business ordinance as directed by City Council. Some of you may have heard our presentation and our updates. We've been going to all of the neighborhood advisory boards and a number of interest groups. We will be holding a stakeholders meeting in this room on June 22nd at 5:30, where we will be presenting the draft ordinance It's 4 sections of RMC, so if you are interested in hearing the initial presentation on that, that also is going to be a fairly large presentation. We are looking to bringing that to Planning Commission in September, the second meeting in September. We're going back to council in August for additional direction, but we will be holding the stakeholders meeting in here on the 22nd at 5:30.
Mr. Chairman, Claudia?
Yes.
Sorry, one more clarification, please. We can sit in on the meeting but not participate on the June 22nd meeting, correct?
That's correct.
What keeps us?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Good clarification. Okay. Moving on then to commissioner suggestions for future agenda items. Mr. Hawkins?
Still waiting for the sustainability gal to give us a package on what we requested a couple weeks ago. She was going to give us the breakdown of everything that City of Reno owns and what it's producing as far as renewable energy. We're still waiting on that package.
Okay. Item 13, public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. Not seeing anyone left in the audience. I'm going to close public comment and move on to adjournment. So moved. Have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.